This is the Less Insurance Dependence podcast show with my good friend Gary Takas and myself, Naren Raja.
We appreciate your listenership, your time, and most of all, we appreciate your intention to reduce insurance dependence in your practice. Our goal is to provide information that will help you successfully reduce insurance dependence and convert your practice into a thriving and profitable dental practice that provides you with personal, professional, and financial satisfaction.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Less Insurance Dependence podcast, the official podcast of the Reducing Insurance Dependence Academy, www.rid.academy. Membership to the Academy is a gift from Gary and I in appreciation for your listenership. Visit rid.academy and don't forget to register. By registering, you will have access to all of our resources and a free pass to all of our events, including our annual summit. I am Naren, your co-host. Today's podcast is titled, Is it possible to successfully resign from PPO plans in smaller towns? It's a great topic. I'm looking forward to hearing what Gary has to say. Before I jump into today's topic, I have an announcement to make, and that is we have a Thriving Dentist Live event happening on the 9th of April, which is coming up within a few weeks, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Go to thrivingdentist.com/events with an S and sign up. The topic we'll be covering is building strong patient relationships in dentistry. You will learn a ton. We'll have awesome experts, and you're going to learn a lot about true and tried techniques and strategies to build strong patient relationships. Looking forward to seeing you there. You will get 1 hour of CE. Now let's jump into today's topic. Is it possible to successfully resign from PPO plans in smaller towns? Gary, what do you think? Let me start by asking you.
So let me give the backstory to this. Here's the backstory to this episode. Recently, I had a coaching strategy meeting with a potential client that has a very, very strong practice. And I'm not going to use his name and I'm not going to use the town, but I'll share some details. So he's in a town of about 50,000 and a decent sized town. And when you include the drawing area around it, it's probably more like 75,000 people. I'd kind of qualify that still as a small town. Would you agree demographically, Naren?
Yeah.
So he's in a town and he said, I don't know if I can do it in my town because I know all the dentists in town.
All right.
And he said, every dentist in town is either a PPO provider or they're part of a DSO or they're corporate, everyone. And I said, well, wait a minute. I've learned that we have to be careful with absolutes, always and never, or everyone or nobody. And you said everyone. I said, do you literally mean every? He said, Gary, I know them. And this is a doctor, in his mid 50s and, he's been involved in the dental society, knows the community. So it's entirely possible he does know all of his colleagues, in the town. Right. He said, every one of them has a PPO model, or they sold to a DSO and they're part of a DSO, which would mean that they're heavily involved with PPOs, right? And so his question was, hey, there's no one around me doing it, so can it even be done here? Fair question. I mean, he doesn't have a model. It's like doing something that's never been done in his area. It's like, that's a blessing and a curse, right? Because I said, well, it's actually good news. You'd be the one. You would be the one that patients in your community would seek out if they're looking for something other than dentistry as a commodity.
Yeah.
And, we're in a Zoom meeting like this and his eyes got really big and he said, I never thought about it. I was thinking of it the other way, that I would feel better if there was another example. Yeah, it's been done here already. I said, no, you got to look at it the other way around and say you would be pioneering a path, presenting a very different model to people in your community. And he said, Gary, to be honest, he said, I know a lot of my colleagues in town, and a lot of them are quality dentists. They're doing quality dentistry. I don't know what their teams are like, or I don't know what their marketing's like. I don't know this, but I know them to be quality dentists. And the fly in the ointment in their practices is the sheer amount of money, they're handing to the PPO plans. He said, that's the problem with my practice. So what I told him, I said, you're going to have to make the evaluation yourself, but we have helped in our coaching. We've helped dentists in every locational environment, urban, suburban, small town, just like his, medium-sized town, large town, rural, remote, company towns where, the town is heavily dominated by a single employer. That comes to mind. A particular client in Tennessee comes to mind because in that town, a town of about the same, about 50,000, about a 75,000 drawing area, there's a big Toyota assembly factory. And a lot of the economy in that town revolves around that Toyota plant. Either they work for them or work for a vendor that relates to them. And yet in that area, he was able to go completely fee for service.
I think you bring up a good point, Gary. We as humans make up our beliefs based on what we see around us. If everybody quote unquote is doing something, we think it's doable. If everybody quote unquote is not doing something, we don't think it's doable, right? And a lot of times this quote unquote everybody is not necessarily scientific, it's not logic based. Like I remember somebody saying, after every trip, do you need to throw away your car? Well, we used to throw away our satellites, right? Our rockets, so why don't we throw our cars too, right? So just because everybody's doing something doesn't mean it makes sense. And
but we have a great example culturally, Naren. I'm a runner, and our listeners know that I'm a runner. When Roger Bannister in 1954 broke the 4-minute mile, it was deemed impossible.
Right.
Sports psychologists, physiologists said, no, the human body cannot get enough oxygen to run a mile in 4 minutes. Right. And Roger Bannister said, phooey, I'm going to show you I can do it. And it sure, I took massive amount of training, and he did it. And you think about it, from the dawning of time, from the beginning of records till then, nobody had ever run a less than a 4-minute mile.
Because they believe they can't do it, because they were told they can't do it.
Now Roger does it, and within 3 months, 3 other guys ran sub 4, right?
3 months. That's crazy, right?
And now today, fast forward to today, which in the scheme of human evolution, it's 60 some years. Yeah. That's like a micro fiber, in the human evolution. And the world record now is 342.
Wow.
342. And there's high schoolers, world-class high school runners that consistently run under 4 minutes. The human evolution hasn't changed, but what changed was the mindset. So I shared this story because he was looking at like, well, it's never been done, so I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah.
How did Roger Bannister? So I shared the Roger Bannister story with him. And he goes, "You're telling me I need to be Roger Bannister?"
No,
I
you
said,
need to be.
No, you need to tell yourself you need to be Roger.
Yeah.
I said, tell me more about your practice. And he describes it. And he said, I've got an amazing and credential. He had credentials as long as his arm, legitimate credentials.
And I do think, going back to that, running thing, right? I bet Roger Bannister had a plan, a training schedule, right? He just worked on it. I bet he was checking his time.
It wasn't random.
It was not random. He probably was doing 4-2, 4-3. He's like, okay, if I push myself, I'll get to 4 or less than 4,
Actually, his training plan was a little bit different, Aaron. A mile is 4 laps. Depends on whether it's meters or yards. Back then, this was in Roger Bannister's from England, by the way. So it was 4 laps around. And so he figured out what time he had to be for a lap.
Yeah.
Each lap. And then so what he did is he got to a point where he could run 1 lap in that time.
Yeah.
Then he extended, then it was 2.
Yeah.
And he was like spent at the end of it, like, oh no, I got no more gas in the tank. Then he did 3.
Right.
And 3.5. And then he did 4. It worked, right. But you're right. It was a plan. It was a plan,
right? Same thing here, right? Patients today want quality dentistry. They don't want the commodity dentist. Typically that's how they think of PPO plans. So, I mean, I know this is your game, Gary. You help people figure out a game plan on like how to provide dentistry that people want to pay for, and then how to do it consistently.
Yeah.
And you have a practice that doesn't depend on PPO plans, period.
when he described his team, I said, "Tell me a little bit more about your team." Um, and he's starting to describe the team, and these were all long-term team members. They've been with him for a long time.
Yeah.
They're at the top of their game. He's got a great team. He's got a great facility. He took the camera and showed me around his office just so I'd have a sense of what the office looked like. So, oh my gosh. And the bottom line is, I said, "Doctor, you're giving patients many reasons to choose you for their care."
Right.
And I actually think the mindset shift you need to make is, I'll be the one they'll choose,
right,
instead of nobody's done it.
right.
And I said, I can tell you, this is not your community, but we've done this in many communities that are demographically just like yours. Same size, small town, same kind of environment. And it's been done. So it has been done before. It just hasn't been done in your town.
Right.
But my answer to the question is, is it possible to successfully resign from PPO plans in smaller towns? The answer is absolutely.
Right.
You can do it. You don't have to have the model of other. Think about it, Naren. What if when I asked him the question, are there other PPO, are there other fee-for-service practices in your town? What if he was to say, yeah, there's half a dozen? Is that good or bad?
Actually, it's bad because now you have to compete with those guys.
I mean, it's total mindset. It's you can answer it either way. There's no right answer.
Yeah, I'm just.
But you're right. I would agree with you.
Yeah.
That well, then they've got 5 other offices they could choose from.
Yeah.
Right now, it's going to be you. You're going to be the really nice restaurant in town that people want to go to.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was interesting because he goes, we do have some really nice restaurants in town. But he said, in fact, and we had a little sidebar, but he goes, we have more high-end restaurants than you'd expect for a town like ours. So there you go.
These people are paying money for what they want.
There you go. They're paying for something that they want. Yeah. And he gave them, and then I said, we got to get tactical with it. You need to develop a marketing plan.
Yeah.
What are you doing for marketing? He said, nothing, because I signed up for these plans. I'm already paying through the nose for marketing. I said, well, then, get set up with Equa, get Equa bringing everyone that uses the internet. I said, how tech savvy is your town? He says, actually very tech savvy. And I said, well, that's how they're going to find dentists. They're going to go online. We're going to get you on page 1 of Google. Equa is going to get you on page 1 of Google. And there's your patient flow. We're going to replace all the ones that you lost and replace the flow that historically came from these plans. And now you're off to the races. I said, imagine what I use that kind of future focus. I said, let's do a little exercise. How would your practice be if you didn't have those write-offs? How would, let's assume you lose a modest amount of patients like we always see. How would your practice be? He goes, oh my God, that solves everything that ails my practice right now.
Absolutely, Gary.
So do it, but I thought it was a really good topic, because I'm sure there's listeners that fit that same criteria. Now, I actually have the opposite of that, Naren, with a client of ours in our coaching. When she discovered, and this is a bigger town, a town of 100,000, so 4 times the size of the town, but we were waiting to pull the trigger on Delta. We'd resigned from all the other plans successfully, and Delta was the last one. That's usually the format we follow because it's the biggest. And then she said, Gary, I just learned something. In our city, town, big town, she said, we are the last dentist in network, dental office in network with Delta. How do you feel about that, Naren?
Yeah, I mean, if she's a premium provider and they're giving her, good fees, maybe I might consider sticking around.
Nope, she's younger, and it's PPO.
PPO. Yeah, then I think I'm just wondering how come she didn't quit sooner. I guess because she just started. Yeah.
Well, she didn't know. She said, the team's been telling me all this last year that we have been getting many calls from patients saying, hey, my dentist is going out of network with Delta. Are you a Delta provider? So we've been getting those calls. So she said it was kind of on my radar screen, but I decided to kind of check it out and discovered that we are the last. She was able to go to the, you can actually find that out. How do you think she found it out, Naren? That they were the last one? She went to the Delta website.
And looked for somebody who's on their network.
And looked for, and they were the only one, in that area, in their town. And she said, God, I should have done this a long time ago because they don't have other choices if they're looking for a Delta provider.
Yeah.
And this is, again, a really good office. That was an unusual situation. This situation with the doctor in the small town that nobody else, is out of network, that's more common.
Right.
But when he described, he said, how would your practice be, assuming you lose a modest number of patients, how would your practice be without having those write-ups? So, my God, it solves every problem I have in my practice, that solves.
Right.
I wonder how many of our listeners that's true for. What was Einstein's famous quote? The definition of insanity: continuing to do what you've always done, expecting something different.
Results. Yeah.
Yeah.
You won't get different results.
I mean, you're doing the same thing. So if you're going to stay in network, how would you expect anything to change?
Yeah.
And it was a very insightful coaching strategy meeting. If any of our listeners would like to go through one of those meetings with me and tell me what's going on in your town, your practice, what your concerns are, and I want to assure you that we don't minimize your concerns. We don't minimize them. They're real. They're real. But when I shared with him, I literally asked him a question. He said, nobody else and everyone else in town, everyone else is in PPO plans.
Yeah.
I said, well, is that good news or bad news?
It's like full of McDonald's. You can put up the nice restaurant. I
wouldn't want to be a Burger King franchisee then,
exactly.
Or Taco Bell or whatever the other ones are.
Yeah.
But I asked him, I said, well, is that good news or bad news? He said, well, I haven't seen it done here, so I'm wondering if it can be done here.
Right. So that fear is what keeps people down. Like fear is like, and I think that's the number one thing you do. You give people permission to let go of the things that are holding them back,
Yeah. Like, I asked him, I said, are there people in town that don't have insurance?
Mm-hmm.
Well, sure there are. Well, let's go find them.
Yeah.
And the other officers aren't trying to find them because they get enough patients. They get flooded with patients from Delta.
Yeah. The ones who want free dentistry, right? Like, anybody will want something for free, right? So you're the one that was choose.
That was one of the things that we got deeper in the conversation. I said, tell me about your mix of services. And he's very well trained with credentials. Yeah. And he's got a nice mix of high value services. But I asked him, I said, how much of your practice, your schedule is made up of those high value services? And his answer was, not as much as I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
And I said, well, do you think that one reason could be is that they only want what's covered by insurance?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's
exactly
you're attracting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what if we marketed differently?
Exactly.
What if I think it helped him. It was reassuring to him when he said it has been done in other towns like yours.
Right.
So it has been done. But I watched him shift his thinking on it. And I thought it'd make a good episode. I imagine that applies to a lot of our listeners. Naren, let's hit pause here. Let's bring it back full circle. Coming up on April 9th, we've got a Thriving Dentist Live event, Building Strong Relationships in Dentistry. Obviously, that's key to successfully going out of network. Come join us at that Thriving Dentist Live event, April 9th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, and 4 p.m. Pacific. Go to thrivingdentist.com/events. I think you'll get a lot out of that, and you'll be building another area of strength to help you successfully resign from PPO plans. On that note, thank you for the privilege of your time. Naren and I look forward to connecting with you on the next Less Insurance Dependence podcast.